I'll concede your point just for brevity. But
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
Citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right?
oh my
Capital
God,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to episode 319 of the Buck Around. I am 100% of the Buck Around today. This is Richard Branch. Just recording a quick intro here into our interview with Chris Iseman from NorthJersey.com. Decided just to break the show this week into two pieces because this interview was long enough, and the part we did that was Wisconsin specific was long enough. And for the Rutgers people who are coming in to listen to Chris, they may or may not want to hear the Wisconsin stuff. But I'll always say this now, sort of at the top of these: if you're a Rutgers interloper for this episode, you might like our pod. We're nice people. It's good to know about other schools in the Big Ten, and we're not huge raging homers, and we're pleasant. So if you listen to this and you like it, you like the way the conversation went, you like the questions asked, give us a listen. Otherwise, for our regular listeners, we will be back next week. We're taking the week off. We'll be back next week, the week of July 22nd, with a new show. We're both, Max and I are going to be on the road the week of the 15th, on the move a little more than we wanted to be. So getting something recorded during those days will be tricky, but we'll be back the following week to get something put to wax. So on that note, let's go talk to Chris. And excited to welcome back to the Buck Around for his second annual appearance, whether he likes it or not, Chris Iseman from NorthJersey.com. Chris, thank you for returning and discussing Rutgers football with us. And again, by the way, I think we did this right before or right after 4th of July last year. So yet again, it's two guys in the hotbeds of college football, that is Long Island and New Jersey.
It couldn't get any bigger.
Yes, I mean, this is quintessential college football right here. Yeah. So,
good to be back on. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. So, like I said, last year you came on and said sort of the goal last year, and if you were to say a successful season for Rutgers was making a bowl. And they did that. Here's my question for you. For a lot of our listeners, and quite honestly for me, because it was the only Rutgers game I saw last year, was the Wisconsin game. If you take out, kind of that wonky pick six at the half, right, that goes back 95 yards, it seemed like the idea Schiano has there is it's almost sort of like a let's play some, not conservative, but play safe offense, play sound defense, field position, and, find yourself with a puncher's chance at the end of the game. Is that fair to say? Is that how they put together the season, would you say?
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. Last year, they were a very, very good running team. They had Kyle Monongai, who was the one who led the Big Ten in rushing yards, was Rutgers' first 1,000-yard rusher since 2014. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that was the way that Rutgers wanted to play, be conservative on offense. I think part of that had to do with the fact that, they had a quarterback in Gavin Wimsatt whose passing game was up and down, struggled with accuracy. So they didn't want to give the ball away at inopportune times, which they had a tendency to do, including in that Wisconsin game. That was just kind of a backbreaker. And so, yeah, I mean, they were very good at running the ball last season. Their offensive line had made some progress. And then on the defensive side, that unit really came together well. So, and obviously in special teams, Greg Schiano's program it's always very good on special teams. So I think that was the formula they wanted to win, and they did it, just enough to get to a bowl game last year, and then obviously finish 7-6. But I think the way that you characterize it was spot on.
Oh, interesting. It's like it was almost like a mini Iowa, but not as easy to make fun of, I would say.
Right. Slightly more productive.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, okay, I get what they're doing. So I'm curious. You see, as you said, passing game was up and down. We have the departure of Gavin Wimsatt. Ethan Kaliakmanis is coming in, who Kirk Straka has a relationship with from Minnesota, but I believe the back is gone, right? What does the offense look like to you for Rutgers in 24? How good do you think Kaliakmanis can be? Because I know he's named the starter. There's no competition after spring. They named him. So is this a step up? Is the offense going to be better? Where are your questions? Walk us through all those sort of scenarios.
Yeah, I think it's I think that Kaliakmanis is a step up, certainly with his passing ability. I know that, Rutgers is confident and encouraged by what it saw in spring practice. And I asked Greg Schiano, point blank, what was the difference between, why did Ethan win the job? And he said, well, I think his accuracy. So it was like, there's no question that the accuracy was an issue that Rutgers needed to fix. It feels like it's done that with Ethan Kaliakmanis. They really like him as a quarterback. They like what he can bring. And so I think that if they can get their passing game going, they have some really good, wide receivers now. They've got some depth at that position, some young guys who have come in and really showed some good things in the spring. And again, it's the spring. So, some of the freshmen, early enrollees, they were impressive, but, we'll see what they can do actually once the season starts. They have some receivers that played well last season, kind of in their younger guys, freshman Ian Strong's one of them. They have a transfer, Dymere Miller from Monmouth. So basically what I'm trying to say is they feel like the passing game can get better this year. And then, the running game, I think, is going to be a strength again. Kyle Monangai is back for another season, which was a huge thing for them. He decided to forego the NFL for one more year. And then they have some good depth at that position too, from, Sam Brown and Deshaun Benjamin. And they brought in another kid, Antoine Raymond. So, they've got some good talent at that position. And it's just a matter of, how much can they get better? Can their offensive line continue to take another step forward this year to kind of allow the offense overall to be a little bit more productive? But again, they're confident. This is Kirk Schrock's second year as the OC. He said when he came back that in his second year with a program is where he's always seen a jump in productivity, that they feel like that's kind of when things get going. So, their Rutgers is confident and they're optimistic and they're hopeful. Really, because at this point in the summer, that's all you can really be is hopeful that unit can take a step forward overall.
All right, let me switch to defense then. I had thought Monangai left, so thank you for correcting me on that. But the guy who did stay, which surprised me, was Mohamed Toure. I am curious about the defense because that guy can ball. I know they lost the other linebacker who played a lot, but they still have that. And they still have the good defensive end who is fantastic on social media, which is not really important, but I think he's a funny guy. But what do you think of this defense?
I think the defense has a shot to be really good. I mean, it was very good last year, or it was I shouldn't say very good. It was definitely as better as it's been in a long time. But you're right. They have, defensive end Aaron Lewis is back, and then Wesley Bailey, their other defensive end, is back. Tyreen Powell was having a tremendous season. He's a really good linebacker. He's developed into one of the better linebackers in the Big Ten. His season got cut short last year because of a broken wrist, and then he was rehabbing from that. Got back into summer or winter training, winter strength and conditioning, ended up tearing his Achilles. So he's coming back from that now. The hope is that he's going to be ready for the start of the season, but we'll see whether he needs to miss a couple games. But they're hopeful that he'll be ready to go. And then they've got some good, they have some, Flip Dixon is back at safety. Desmond Igbinosun's back. But as you said, the return of Mo Toure at linebacker is huge. That is a grown man playing at that position. And he had a tremendous season last year coming off a torn ACL. It was his first year playing linebacker full time because he had split linebacker and defensive end until that point. So his first full season as a linebacker, obviously, he was great. And he said that was part of the reason why he wanted to come back. He felt like he wanted another season of playing exclusively at that position, another season of getting some film, for NFL evaluators. So, that was a huge addition. And they've got pieces on defense. That unit has a shot to be really good. Because they're experienced and they're not, Greg Schiano often talks about like his pipeline, right? You got to develop guys and then get them, ideally, you get them off to the NFL and then you have other guys step up and replace them. And they're grown men at this point. You need 20, 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds to win in the Big Ten. Rutgers didn't have that for a long time, especially the first couple of years of this current Schiano regime. They were younger guys. Now, on that side of the ball, they're older. They've developed. So that they're hoping that translates to results.
Yeah, I was really honestly surprised that, especially with Toure coming back, do you take it as a sign? I mean, I don't mean this to sound leading, but to me, it's sort of like a sign of, okay, there's a buy-in from these older guys that have seen a growth? Or is it, I put my name in and I did not get the feedback on where I was going to be drafted and I got to put in more film type of thing?
No, I think it's more of the first thing that you said. I do think that there was a real sense of kind of a buy-in, of sort of determination of I think the other thing too is once one guy sees another guy coming back, another guy comes back, and all of a sudden it's a domino effect where everybody says, okay, let's do this one more time. Let's see what we can do. I mean, Robert Longerbeam, I didn't mention him. He's developed into a really good cornerback. I mean, the list goes on of guys on the defensive side of the ball that decided to come back. And I remember doing a story on it. I believe it was during the winter or late last season, or I think maybe around the bowl game. I can't remember exactly when it was, when a lot of guys were announcing their decisions to come back. And it was kind of bucking the trend in college football because so many guys, whether it was NIL or either transferring or they were going off to the NFL, but Rutgers found a way to bring so many of these guys back and kind of maintain the bulk of their defense, with the exception of the guys that had to leave because they were out of eligibility. But yeah, I mean, it was definitely, a different theme than what was happening around college football. And a lot of their impact players, if not most of them, decided that, they felt like they need to give this one, give it another go and see what they can do, because they do feel like there's, I hate this term because I feel like it's such a cliche, but unfinished business.
Mm-hmm.
They felt like last year was a real step forward, and they want to kind of, see what they can do again together this year.
So that actually leads me right into it. What do you think this team does in 24? I mean, the schedule gets easier in a sense, just because you're not sitting in the Big Ten East anymore as Rutgers or Indiana or Maryland anymore, those schools. But what do you feel like?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you take away Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, your schedule opens up a little bit. Obviously, you're replacing with USC, UCLA, and Washington. But, I think there's no question that this is a more favorable schedule this year. I think that the out of conference is, the toughest game by far is going to be the Virginia Tech game in September on the road. That's a tough place to play. Rutgers beat Virginia Tech last year, but Virginia Tech was a very different team at the end of the year than it was at the start of the year. They really got better. They're well coached. That's going to be a tough out of conference game, but yeah, I mean, listen, I think that Rutgers, and a lot of fans are probably going to be skeptical about this, but I think they have a shot. If everything goes well and they stay healthy, I think they have a shot to make some noise. And again, for Rutgers, is that 7 wins? Is that 8 wins? I think 8 wins is probably the ceiling, which would be a great year for them if they can get to that point. But I think, a 7-win season is very realistic with the schedule that they have, with the talent they have coming back. I don't think it's ever going to be, they're not going to be blowing teams out. I just don't think that's the way that they play. But if they can go into the fourth quarter with a chance to win games and find a way to get it done, I think they have a shot to have a solid season. I think after going through the bowl game last year, I think there's no question that has to be the goal. That has to be, it would be I think a major disappointment if they fail to qualify for a bowl. But yeah, the schedule's more favorable, so it's going to be interesting to see if they can take advantage of it.
So that's interesting. You think it's basically a combination of a better team and an easier schedule in your mind?
Yeah.
I mean, so it should be better,
right?
I
think more talent, more depth. I think a year older combined with a more favorable schedule. I think all those things kind of factor into their advantage. But and better quarterback play. If they get better quarterback play, that's going to be a huge part, huge piece of the puzzle. So if all of that goes well, which in sports, doesn't always happen that way, but if all of that goes well, I think Rutgers has a shot to, again, be a really solid team.
So you kind of lead me into a larger structural question that I have as well, and it's something we've been asking people about with two things. One, with the reshuffling of the conference. I mean, obviously that works in Rutgers' favor. As I just said, I feel like Indiana and Rutgers and Maryland are the big winners here. Even if you're going to add a UCLA or a Washington to a schedule, or a USC for that matter, they're not all three going to be the murderer's row that we sort of see out of the big three in the Big Ten right now. But along those lines, the thing that's really catching my eye with Rutgers is I think they have 28 guys committed in the class right now, something like that.
Yeah. 28.
And they have 5 composite 4-stars on the 24/7, I think it is, or 4?
I believe it was 5. I think last time I checked, the class ranked 11th in the country.
Yeah,
and third in the Big Ten.
Yeah, they're way up there. I mean, they're kind of like what Wisconsin's got right now, which is like high numbers. I mean, other teams are going to leapfrog both schools eventually, but I mean, he's going to end up with. It's going to be a top 30 class.
Yeah,
for sure.
Most likely.
Why is that happening now?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually just did a story about that last week. It's a culmination of factors. I think number one, Greg Schiano is a very good recruiter. So it starts there. He was the recruiter of the year in 2018 when he was the defensive coordinator at Ohio State. He was named that by 24/7 Sports. So he is a good recruiter. That's the number one thing. He's got a coaching staff of also very good recruiters. His assistants are really solid. The fact that Rutgers had a winning season last year, his first one in a decade, that was a big deal. You start to show that, until then he was showing a vision. Now he actually has evidence that it's moving in the right direction. He had a winning season. He had a bowl win over a big brand in Miami, which I know that Miami didn't have all of its players, but it was still a win over Miami. And for Rutgers, that's a significant deal. And just the fact that, it's a chance to play in the Big Ten. A lot of these players want that opportunity and maybe aren't getting, a lot of them are getting looked at by, the bigger name programs, but this is an opportunity to come in and play right away. So I think that helps. And so there's all these factors that kind of, have led to this recruiting momentum. And, the other thing too is they've got, I think it was something like 8 players from New Jersey, or a lot of the guys in state, high level players are now looking at Rutgers as a serious option. Whether they just flipped a kid who's from Jersey City and he was committed to Penn State, DJ McClary, a linebacker, and he flipped to Rutgers, which a few years ago that would have been unheard of. That never would have happened. Now it's starting to happen more. So I think as Rutgers becomes more and more of a legitimate option, you see these kids start to consider it, and it's momentum. So much of recruiting is momentum, and it's made a difference.
How much of this do you think is a developed NIL structure? Is that's the big thing we're all trying to learn these days, just as observers of the sport, because a lot of it is so opaque, and obviously nothing is really public. And from your perspective, how much of a sense do you get that that's a structure that's been built up and is working at this point?
I think not for high school recruits. I don't think Rutgers really doesn't go into that. They really use NIL for retention to keep guys in the program. For high school recruits, it really hasn't been much of a factor at all.
Interesting.
It's just not. It's not how they decide to use that money. It's like I said, it's mostly for roster retention.
So do you think that plays into some of the guys coming back as well? And also just the thing I can't get over is he really hasn't lost guys in the portal. And it's not I don't mean this to sound like it's cheapening what Schiano has done. I just wondered, these guys need an infrastructure. And I've been surprised at how robust they appear compared to other schools, quite frankly.
Yeah, I think that it would be naive to say that NIL didn't play some role in those guys deciding to come back. The older players that we were talking about earlier deciding to give it another go. I think that helps. But at the same time, Rutgers' NIL situation is not what it is at a lot of other schools. It's not. Right. It's not as robust, to say the least. So, was that a factor? Yeah, of course. And, money's money, right? Money talks. But I don't think that they were getting this significant amount of money that, was like jaw-dropping and made their decision for them. I think it helped, but I don't think that was the ultimate factor in the decision.
Interesting. So then, all right, Greg Schiano is what? I think like 57, 58? He's
just turned 58.
Okay, there you go. He's got, 5-7 years that he probably wants to keep coaching before he moves on to whatever those guys do when they retire, which is probably consult and watch game film, which is very weird, but that's their lives. What do you think sort of like the long-term, hey, this is reasonable to expect from Rutgers in the next several years?
I think, listen, there's always going to be fans that think that, the national championship down the line, that there's always that segment of the
hence
fans.
reasonable. I did use the word reasonable.
Yeah, reasonable. So for us, observers, unbiased observers, the media and everybody else, I think it's, if Rutgers can get to a point where it's competitive every year, having winning seasons, going to a bowl game every year, I think that's what this program, the fans would embrace it, I think, for the most part. And I think that's a very, very potential, what was the word I'm looking for? Legitimate option, a legitimate path for this program to go toward. Yeah, I think that's very possible.
So sort of like an NC State of the Big Ten. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, you could. Yeah, something like that. That's probably a good option or a good comparison. Yeah. I think something like that, where you're competitive every season, and that's kind of the direction it was going the first time around. But yeah, you in the rankings sometimes maybe, stuff like that. I think that's what this program can become. I think, again, in the current state of college football, I think it's so difficult to determine what any team is going to be, because just it literally changes, I feel like, every day about what's possible and what's not possible. But yeah, I think if this team can get to a point where it's putting together winning seasons consistently, getting to a bowl game consistently, I think that would be a real step forward and kind of what this program can become.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me. I feel like no team has, my perception of a team in terms of what its ceiling could be has changed more, I think, in the Big Ten in the last few years than Rutgers. It was just interesting to watch. To me, watching it last year, I understood what they were trying to do. They couldn't do it in that game just because again,
right.
Well, you're not going to pass and you're done. And you're down 17-0, and that team's not coming back from that when you watch Rutgers. But I got what they were trying to do, and it was a proof of concept. So it's very interesting for me to see sort of where they're going, and with a guy who is obviously a capable and competent coach.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
Chris, I really appreciate you coming on and doing this. I'm going to let you get back to vacation. You are working on an excellent vacation beard. I just want to say, I don't know if it started during vacation, but if it
did not, it started this is just a combination of already having some semblance of a beard and then just being completely lazy.
That's excellent. Well, go with it, because you're selling it right now.
Thank you. I appreciate
Nobody gets to see this because this is audio only, but you at least get me saying it's good. So again, Chris Iseman, NorthJersey.com, second year in a row. I'm sorry you have terrible judgment and came back, but we do appreciate you returning and doing
I appreciate having me on. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been The Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.